The phone rang at 3:47 in the morning, and the voice on the other end spoke only 6 words before the line went dead. Musa has activated the red network. Ibrahim Traoré set the phone down on the wooden desk, and for 3 full seconds, he did not move. His chief of security, standing in the doorway of the dimly lit office in Ouagadougou, watched the president's face for any flicker of shock, any tremor of fear. There was none. Traoré stood, adjusted the collar of his military fatigues, and spoke with a voice so steady it seemed to slow down the panic vibrating through the room. "Wake the inner council. No phones. Face-to-face only. We have less than 4 hours." 4 hours. That was the window. In 4 hours, the man Ibrahim Traoré had once called his brother, the man who had slept on the floor beside him as a child in Koudougou, who had shared his last bowl of rice during the hardest years, who had stood at his side during the earliest and most dangerous days of revolution, that man, Moussa Diabaté, was going to try to destroy everything. Not just Traoré's presidency, not just his government. Moussa intended to dismantle the very idea that Burkina Faso could stand on its own. And the worst part, the detail that would have broken a lesser man, was this: Moussa was not acting alone. He had allies inside the Presidential Guard. He had contacts in foreign intelligence services. He had money, a lot of it, flowing from accounts that should not have existed. And he had a plan that had been building silently, invisibly, for over a year. But Ibrahim Traoré already knew. He had known for 11 months. Yet the story of Moussa and Ibrahim did not begin in the halls of power. It began in dust, in the narrow, unpaved streets of a neighborhood where electricity was a luxury and ambition was considered a kind of madness. They were born 3 houses apart. Their mothers traded spices and gossip. Their fathers worked the same stretch of farmland during the rainy season. Ibrahim was the quiet one, the boy who read books under trees while other children played football. Moussa was the loud one, the protector, the one who threw the first punch when older boys tried to bully Ibrahim for carrying a school bag that was too clean for their neighborhood. They were inseparable. Everyone in Koudougou said it. Those two would either change the country or burn it down. For a long time, it looked like they would change it together. When Ibrahim entered military training, Moussa followed. When Ibrahim rose through the ranks on merit, discipline, and a tactical mind that his superiors quietly admitted was sharper than their own, Moussa rose beside him, not on the same merit, but on proximity, and that was the first crack, invisible to everyone, perhaps even to Moussa himself, because Moussa was brave, yes, loyal, certainly, but somewhere deep inside, in a place he never examined, Moussa did not want to walk beside Ibrahim Traoré. He wanted to walk ahead. And as the years unfolded and it became clear that Ibrahim was not just another officer, but something rarer, a man whose integrity could not be purchased, whose vision could not be blurred, whose courage did not depend on an audience, Moussa felt something curdle inside him. It was not hatred, not yet. It was something quieter and more dangerous. It was the slow, corrosive realization that his childhood friend was becoming the man Moussa had always told himself he would be. When Ibrahim Traoré rose to lead the nation, Moussa stood in the crowd and cheered. He embraced Ibrahim that night with tears in his eyes, and those tears were real. But they were not tears of joy. They were the last tears of a friendship that had already begun to die. Because Moussa looked at the presidential residence, at the convoy, at the saluting soldiers, and he did not see his friend's achievement. He saw his own absence. He saw a seat that could have been his. And from that night forward, every conversation between them carried an invisible weight, a tension that Ibrahim noticed but chose out of love to ignore. That was his one mistake. Not a mistake of strategy, a mistake of the heart. Traoré gave Moussa a position of trust, a senior advisory role within the Defense Ministry with access to intelligence briefings, troop deployment schedules, and communication networks. He did this not out of naivety, but out of a genuine belief that Moussa's loyalty, once the foundation of their friendship, could be the foundation of their shared service to Burkina Faso. For a time, it seemed to work. Moussa attended meetings. He contributed. He was competent. But behind every closed door, in every private moment, Moussa was building something else entirely. The first sign came in January 2025. A routine audit of communication logs within the Defense Ministry flagged an anomaly. A series of encrypted transmissions routed through a server in Abidjan, then bounced to a relay node in Paris. The transmissions were short, irregular, and expertly disguised. They would have gone unnoticed entirely if not for a young signals intelligence analyst named Lieutenant Aminata Sawadogo, who had developed her own pattern recognition protocol as a personal project during her off hours. She brought the anomaly to her commanding officer. Her commanding officer dismissed it. She brought it again with more data, dismissed again. So she did something that would later be called either reckless or heroic. She brought it directly to the presidency. Ibrahim Traoré sat with her for 45 minutes. He asked precise questions. He did not interrupt. He did not dismiss. And when she finished, he thanked her, asked her to continue monitoring in absolute secrecy, and told her to report only to him. Yet he did not tell her what he already suspected. He did not tell her the name that was forming in his mind like a wound reopening. He simply said, "Your work matters, Lieutenant. Burkina Faso will remember it." Over the next months, the picture sharpened. The encrypted transmissions were part of a network, what intelligence circles would later call the Red Network, a covert infrastructure designed to coordinate a multi-pronged destabilization operation. The network connected disgruntled military officers, foreign-funded media operatives, black market arms dealers operating along the northern border, and at least 2 foreign intelligence assets whose identities were shielded behind layers of diplomatic cover. The purpose of the network was not a simple coup. It was far more sophisticated than that. The plan was to engineer a cascading crisis, simultaneous security incidents in 3 northern provinces, a coordinated media campaign accusing the government of collapse, economic disruption through sabotage of key infrastructure, and then, in the chaos, a stabilization committee would emerge, led by military figures who would present themselves as reluctant saviors. Musa's name was nowhere in the early intelligence. He was careful. He had built the network using intermediaries, dead drops, and a cell structure borrowed from insurgent playbooks he had studied during his military training. Each cell knew only its immediate contacts. No single arrest could unravel the whole. It was, by any professional measure, impressive work, but Musa had made one error. He had underestimated Ibrahim Traoré's patience. A lesser leader, upon discovering traces of a conspiracy, would have moved immediately. Arrests, public accusations, military sweeps, the dramatic response, the visible show of force. Traoré did none of this. Instead, he did something far more difficult. He waited. He watched. He let the network grow just enough to reveal its full architecture. He identified not just the soldiers who had been recruited, but the foreign handlers who had recruited them. He traced the money not just to the first account, but through 17 transfers to its origin, a fund controlled by interests that had long viewed Burkina Faso's independence as an inconvenience. He mapped the media operatives, the planted stories, the social media accounts created in bulk to amplify a narrative of chaos that did not yet exist. And he did all of this while continuing to govern, while building alliances with neighboring nations, while advancing infrastructure projects, while standing before his people with the same calm, unshakable resolve they had come to depend on. He carried the knowledge of his friend's betrayal like a stone in his chest, and he never let it show. By September 2025, Traoré had the complete picture. He knew every name, every account, every safe house, every planned incident. He knew the date Musa had chosen for activation, March 14, 2026. He knew the 3 northern provinces targeted for false flag security incidents. He knew which officers would refuse their orders on that day and which would follow them. He knew everything, and still he waited, because Ibrahim Traoré understood something that Musa never did. Power is not about striking first. Power is about striking at the exact moment when your strike is undeniable, irrefutable, and complete. In November 2025, Musa made an unannounced visit to the presidential office. He brought a bottle of palm wine, a gesture from their childhood, when they would steal sips from their father's gourds and pretend to be drunk. He sat across from Ibrahim and smiled. And for a moment, just a moment, the years fell away, and they were boys again, 2 kids from Kudugu, with dust on their feet and the whole world ahead of them. Musa talked about their mothers. He talked about the mango tree they used to climb behind the old schoolhouse. He laughed. Ibrahim laughed too. And then Musa said something that froze the room. "You know, Ibrahim, sometimes I wonder if this country deserves what you're trying to give it." Traoré studied his friend's face. He saw the test hidden inside the words. He saw Musa searching for doubt, for fatigue, for any crack he could later exploit. "Burkina Faso deserves everything," Traoré replied. And more. That is why we do not stop. Musa held his gaze for a beat too long, then smiled again, a smile that did not reach his eyes, and poured more wine. When Musa left that night, Traore stood at the window and watched his friend's car disappear into the darkness. He stood there for a long time, and then he turned to his chief of security and said, "Move the timeline. He's accelerating." He was right. 3 weeks later, intercepted communications confirmed that Musa had pushed the activation date forward, not March 14th, February 22nd. So the reason was chilling in its pragmatism. Musa had learned that 2 of his key officers were getting cold feet. Delay meant unraveling. He needed to move before his own network lost its nerve. Ibrahim Traoré adjusted. Every counter-operation was recalibrated within 72 hours. Officers loyal to the Constitution were quietly repositioned. Communication nodes were prepared for selective disruption. A legal task force working in total secrecy prepared arrest warrants and evidence dossiers that would withstand not only domestic judicial review, but international scrutiny. Traoré was not just planning to stop a conspiracy, he was planning to expose it so thoroughly, so transparently, that no foreign power could later claim ignorance or rewrite the narrative. February 21st, 2026, the night before activation. Yatta Musa made his final round of calls, each one routed through the Red Network's encrypted channels. Each one intercepted, recorded, and logged. He spoke with confidence. He spoke with authority. He told his cells that by tomorrow evening the old order would be swept away and a new Burkina Faso would emerge. He used Ibrahim's name only once, and when he did, his voice carried something that the analysts who later reviewed the recordings could only describe as grief. Even in betrayal, some part of Musa still loved the boy from Kudugu, but love, when curdled by envy and ambition, becomes the most dangerous weapon of all. At 3:47 on the morning of February the 22nd, the call came. Musa has activated the Red Network, and now the 4-hour window was open. Traoré moved with surgical precision. At 4:50, Yim Loyal Army units sealed the 3 targeted northern provinces. The false flag operations that Musa's cells attempted to launch, coordinated attacks designed to look like terrorist incidents, were intercepted before a single shot was fired. In 2 cases, the cell operatives arrived at their staging points to find them already surrounded by soldiers who had been in position for days, waiting in silence, in darkness, with the patience their commander had taught them by example. At 5 o'clock, the communication nodes of the Red Network were shut down simultaneously. Every encrypted channel, every relay, every backup frequency, all went dark in the span of 90 seconds. Musa's network was not just disrupted, it was erased. At 5:30, the media operatives who had been prepared to flood social platforms with fabricated footage and manufactured panic found their accounts suspended, their servers seized, and their handlers already in custody. The narrative of chaos they had spent months crafting never reached a single screen. And at 6 o'clock, as the first light of dawn broke over Ouagadougou, Moussa Diabaté sat in his vehicle outside a military installation on the eastern edge of the city, staring at a phone that no longer connected to anything. He tried every number, every channel, every backup. Silence, complete absolute silence. He looked up and saw military vehicles approaching from 3 directions. Not fast, not aggressive, slow, deliberate, the kind of approach that tells you the decision has already been made, and there is nothing left to negotiate. Musa stepped out of the vehicle. He was carrying a sidearm. For a long, terrible moment, the soldiers who surrounded him believed he might use it, but he did not. He stood there in the pale morning light, and when the lead vehicle stopped and the door opened, he saw Ibrahim Traoré step out. They stood 20 meters apart. The soldiers held their positions. The air was still, and then Ibrahim walked forward, alone, unarmed. His chief of security hissed a protest. Traoré ignored it. He walked until he was close enough to see the lines on Musa's face, the red in his eyes, the tremor in his hand that still rested on the holstered weapon. "You knew," Musa said. It was not a question. "I knew." "For how long?" "Long enough." Musa's jaw tightened. "Then why didn't you stop me sooner?" "Well, why let it go this far?" Traoré's answer was quiet, and the soldiers nearest to them would later say it was the most commanding quiet they had ever heard. "Because I needed the world to see what was behind this. Not just you, the money, the foreign hands, the entire architecture. If I had stopped you in the shadows, they would have built another network with another friend in another year. This ends today, all of it. Musa stared at him, and then, slowly, his hand dropped from the sidearm. He unholstered it, he set it on the ground, and he said something that the official transcripts would never include, but that every witness remembered. "You were always the better man, Ibrahim. I hated you for it, and I hated myself for hating you." Traore did not respond with anger. He did not respond with triumph, but he stepped forward and spoke words meant only for Musa's ears, words that no recording captured, and that Traore himself would never repeat publicly. Whatever he said, Musa closed his eyes, nodded once, and allowed himself to be taken into custody without another word. By 8 o'clock that morning, every cell of the Red Network had been neutralized. 47 arrests across 6 provinces, not a single civilian harmed, not a single shot fired by government forces. The operation was so precise, so contained, that most citizens of Ouagadougou woke to an ordinary Saturday morning with no idea that their nation had nearly been torn apart while they slept. But Ibrahim Traoré understood that silence was not enough. The people of Burkina Faso deserved the truth. And so, at noon on February 22nd, 2026, he addressed the nation. He did not shout. No, he did not pound tables. He stood before cameras in the same fatigues he had worn through the night, and he spoke plainly. He laid out the conspiracy in its entirety. The network, the funding, the foreign involvement, the planned false flag attacks, the media manipulation campaign. He presented evidence, documents, recordings, financial records, and he announced that all of it would be made available for independent review, both domestic and international. He named the foreign entities involved, calmly, factually, without rhetoric, letting the evidence speak with the force of truth. And then he addressed Musa directly, though Musa was no longer in the room, no longer free, no longer the man he had been the day before. "To those who would sell this nation's future for personal power," Traoré said, looking directly into the camera, "now understand this, Burkina Faso is not for sale. It was not for sale yesterday. It is not for sale today, and as long as this nation has people willing to stand, to sacrifice, to choose integrity over comfort, it will never be for sale." The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Across the country, people gathered in public squares, not in anger, not in fear, but in something harder to name. Relief, perhaps, or recognition. The recognition that their leader had been tested by the most personal kind of betrayal and had responded not with vengeance but with precision, not with cruelty but with clarity. In the days that followed, the international community scrambled. The foreign entities Traoré had named issued denials, then clarifications, then silence. The evidence was too thorough, the documentation too complete. Soon, several diplomatic relationships were quietly restructured. Intelligence assets were recalled, funding channels were shut down, not because of threats or bluster, because Ibrahim Traoré had made the truth so visible, so undeniable that denial itself became a liability. The legal proceedings against the conspirators were conducted openly, transparently, and in full compliance with Burkinabe law. Moussa Diabaté was tried, convicted, and sentenced. Traoré did not attend the trial. He did not comment on the proceedings. He had already said everything he needed to say. When asked by a journalist whether he felt betrayed by his childhood friend, Traoré paused, the only public pause anyone could remember him taking, and said, "I feel grateful. Grateful that this nation is strong enough to survive the worst intentions of those who would see it fail, and grateful that the people of Burkina Faso continue to choose courage over fear." In the aftermath, the structural changes were swift and lasting. The intelligence protocols that had allowed the Red Network to form undetected were overhauled. Lieutenant Aminata Sawadogo was promoted and given command of a newly established Signals Intelligence Division. The Defense Ministry underwent a comprehensive review, and new safeguards were implemented, not to create a climate of suspicion, but to ensure that trust, when given, was given on the foundation of accountability. Captain Traoré strengthened relationships with allied nations who had proven their loyalty during the crisis, and quietly but firmly distanced Burkina Faso from those who had revealed their true intentions. But perhaps the most significant change was invisible. It happened in the hearts of ordinary Burkinabe, in the conversations at market stalls, and in the quiet of family compounds at night. People spoke of their president not as a politician, not as a military figure, but as something they had almost stopped believing in. a leader who meant what he said, a man who had been handed every reason to become cynical, to become brutal, to become the very thing he fought against, and who had chosen at every turn to remain exactly who he had always been. Months later, in a rare informal moment captured by a photographer, Ibrahim Traoré was seen visiting Koudougou. He walked the old streets. He stopped at the mango tree behind the schoolhouse. He stood there for a while, alone, looking up at the branches. No one approached, no one spoke. The photograph became one of the most shared images in the country that year, not because of what it showed, but because of what everyone understood it meant. He was remembering, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with the kind of sorrow that only comes when you have loved someone completely and lost them not to death, but to a choice they made against you. He did not stay long. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Burkina Faso was still building, still rising, still demanding the best of those who claimed to serve it. And Ibrahim Traoré walked back to his vehicle, climbed in, and returned to the capital, where the next challenge was already waiting. Because that is what the people of Burkina Faso had learned, what Musa had failed to understand, and what the foreign powers who had funded the Red Network had fatally miscalculated. Ibrahim Traoré was not a man who could be broken by betrayal. He was not a man who could be outmaneuvered by conspiracy. He was not a man who won by luck, by force, or by fear. He won because he was prepared to carry the heaviest burdens. The burden of knowledge, the burden of patience, the burden of a broken friendship, without ever letting those burdens slow his step or cloud his judgment. He won because when the moment came to choose between revenge and justice, between spectacle and substance, between the easy path and the right one, he chose what he always chose. He chose Burkina Faso, and Burkina Faso in return chose him, not once, not temporarily, but with the kind of trust that is forged only in fire, tested only by betrayal, and proven only when a nation watches its leader stand in the worst storm of his life and refuse, absolutely refuse, to bend. The Red Network was dismantled, the foreign interference was exposed, the conspirators faced justice, and Ibrahim Traoré remained exactly where he had always been, not above his people, not apart from them, but among them, steady, unbroken, and moving forward, always forward, because that is the only direction that matters.